There are huge error bands on almost every analytical blood test. There's you can get this data. It's published. It's called proficiency testing data. So every blood laboratory that's reporting blood results that is they sign up for a service. It's called proficiency testing, and they get sent. The laboratories all get sent some blood samples that are contrived. They're made up blood samples that are mixtures of blood, and the key element is that everybody gets the same blood sample. So there's 1,000 laboratories or 5,000 laboratories, and they all get the same blood sample, and so it's identical. And then everybody runs that blood sample on their own machinery. But so you'd expect the same result, right? Wouldn't you?
You would think.
So
you would hope.
And these are all certified laboratories, who are sending out data to patients. But the error bars are like 30%, plus or minus 30%. So this is all what's called, lab error or pre-analytical error. It could be, it's not necessarily error of the machine. It might be an error of the calibration of the machine, but it has a lot more to do with degradation of the sample before it even gets to the machine.
So how many more ways do you think we will be able to test ourselves in the future?
Well, that's what my mission is. My mission is to bring testing to a home setting because I want to eliminate all this pre-analytical error. That's not the primary driver. The primary driver is that I want to give people the information really quickly. And so there's another sort of mode of analysis that's popped up where people want more frequent data. You can't go to your doctor and say, okay, I want weekly CRP or ESR measurements. You can't do that because they won't let you. Their standard of care does not call for that frequency of data, and your insurance won't pay for it. So this has to become a consumer loop, and it's happening more and more. The one loop that has become reasonably popular these days are what are called dried blood spot tests. So you've probably done them. You get a little piece of a paper card, and you prick your finger and you do drip, 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 drip onto the card. You sort of let it do the Polaroid picture thing with it, and shake it, and then you put it in the mail and you send it to the laboratory. So the problem is there's all that pre-analytical error is still there, and it's worse because drying the blood actually increases the pre-analytical error. And the laboratories don't get the sample immediately, and they don't run the sample immediately. There's no urgency about it. So you might not get your data for 7 days.
I'm Sandy Martin, founder of Longevity Leaders Circle, and I'm joined today by Bob Messerschmidt, the visionary behind the health sensors in your Apple Watch and founder of COR Health. If you don't mind starting by just giving me a little background about what you did with Apple and how you brought technology to Apple with your expertise in spectroscopy, is that how you say it?
Spectroscopy, right? I try not to say it. It's from the Greek. Spectros is Greek for light, and the word spectrum comes from that. And scope, scopy, the scope part of it means to measure. So spectroscopy is really just measuring things with light. Most of my career has centered around infrared spectroscopy, which is the region just beyond the red end of what our eyes can see. And those wavelengths, the wavelengths of light, interact with molecules, with all molecules. Could be anything. Water or drug companies use infrared spectroscopy quite a bit. And when those molecules vibrate, when the bonds vibrate in resonance with the wavelength, that absorbs some energy. It's a way to identify materials, and it's a way to quantify materials. and it's used pretty broadly. It's used in all sorts of different health measurements, blood measurements. Blood laboratories use this sort of technology. My early career was really all about industrial applications of this. I was always an instrumentation guy, or at least that's what I was. I thought I was going to be a biochemist, but then I realized when I went to school, and then I realized that I was really interested in building instrumentation that you could use for biochemistry and biomedical research and things like that. So in the early days, before digital health was a thing, my career was really industrial applications. So I built, this is a long time ago. I won't tell you how long ago this was, but I built a thing called an infrared microscope, and it was pretty novel at the time. There were research applications where people had built microscopes. It was basically a way to get an infrared spectrum of a very tiny amount of sample. And but you could align the sample visually with a visible light microscope, and then flip a lever and you would be obtaining an infrared spectrum of it. And it really took off in forensics laboratories. So it became the thing to use for trace evidence analysis. There were a number of high-profile murder cases that were solved using instrumentation that I built back in the, okay, I'll say it, back in the mid-'80s. And so that was my early career. This was all up in Connecticut, just outside of New York City, and it was a startup. So I was working for a guy who was my earliest mentor, who bought a division of a company and changed the product direction of it, hired me on to do product design and development for that, and then the infrared microscope arose from that. That was early history, and then I got involved in digital health in 1992, and I was building custom instrumentation for spectroscopy, and we built some stuff for a team at Sandia National Laboratories in New Mexico, and apparently it worked pretty well. The instrumentation that I built. They were making measurements of trying to determine the concentration of glucose in the human body without having to draw blood. So it was a completely non-invasive optical method, shine a beam of light through a finger or, reflection off of a finger, something like that, and determine the glucose concentration in the blood. And so that was 1992, 93. And it, as I say,
does that work today? Is that a technology that's viable?
No, it's
okay.
still not on the market.
I still keep pricking my finger, and so
there are CGMs now which make it a little bit easier. You've seen these pucks that you can wear on your arm, which can.
I had one last week and it failed on me.
Oh yeah.
Either
yeah,
I almost died last week, just out of the blue.
Beg your pardon?
Or, right, because it gave me readings that suggested I was near death.
Oh my gosh.
And so it was on my 8th day of wearing it, and I think it just doesn't actually last 14 days as it suggested that it could. And so I had to grapple with,
right.
Am I dying, or is it a faulty sensor? And when you have a biometric telling you that maybe don't go to sleep because you might not wake up,
right?
And no amount of orange juice or honey or anything was shifting this for
right.
me.
Yeah.
And I probably truly spiked my blood sugar going through just trying to get the sensor to read properly. So.
You have diabetes or?
No, I was wearing it because I had biohack, and I just wanted to understand the impact. And then I had to figure out that ultimately I do have to trust myself over technology.
Yes. However, so I dove pretty deeply into glucose measurements, especially for people with diabetes, type 1 diabetics, which used to be called juvenile diabetes. It's a virus knocks out the pancreas usually pretty early in life, and then there's very little to no insulin production following that. So you're dependent on insulin injections to to stay alive, basically. So we had a lot of studies involving people with diabetes, and everyone who came through who was a type 1 diabetic felt like they knew what their glucose level was just by the way they felt. And, you hear a lot of this today that, people, feel, one way or another. But especially with glucose, the numbers were random with respect to how people reported what they thought their glucose level was. There was no correlation whatsoever. So,
well, that speaks well to one of the things I really want to get into you with today, which is, how do we, what role does technology play in a consumer's own measurement of their own health, and what's driving them to know? I finally did a finger prick when it suggested that I was below 50 on my glucose, even though it made no sense, and it said I was at 88. And so I knew I was able to check the technology against another technology, but that's frustrating.
It's certainly incumbent on those of us in the instrumentation side to give good data. That's a bit alarming that it had that failure mode, because there were billions of dollars invested in developing CGM, and they started out as a class 3 medical device. And then, so they required full PMA approval with lots of studies and so forth to bring them to market. It was a 10 to 20 year process to bring CGM to market. Just countless billions of dollars spent. And then you can have an experience like that is, not really confidence inspiring.
From a leading manufacturer.
Yeah.
Not an upstart.
Oh, no, yeah. Yeah. So it's incumbent on having good data, but you have to have the data, right? What my original point was, the data is going to be the prima facie evidence of health, and more often than not, it's blood data. So wearables, I think I have a background from being at Apple, and Apple was all about wearables. And most of digital health is about non-invasive solutions, which are great. But the jumping off point for me with my current company, with COR, was that the gold standard information is going to be in the blood. So knowing that Apple would probably never be interested in developing something that involved needing a blood sample, even as unobtrusive as a finger stick, that presents some friction that is kind of like a little bit above beyond the pale, as they say, for Apple. Apple wants even less friction than that. Although I can't say they're not researching such things.
They want the data behind it.
They want the data,
but not to be associated with pain.
Well, it's user experience, right? So I think they understand people, pretty well. I was a little bit maybe more naive, but also I wasn't going for as large a market segment as Apple needs to go for, right? They want something that is appealing to everyone. And, we're with COR, because it's a finger stick, it's not going to be for everyone. But it turns out, a lot of people, especially folks as they get a bit older, they don't mind a finger stick, and they've had plenty of finger sticks for other purposes. And so we're not finding a lot of resistance to that. There's, maybe 10% of the population that is averse, to seeing their own blood. And that's a real thing. I mean,
it took me a minute.
Yeah.
I don't love it.
No, it's a real, it's a real aversion, in the technical term. In the technical sense, it's an aversion where people don't have any control over it. They'll just, faint. But
Well,
That's
let's
not.
pause for a moment and have you explain COR to me as if we haven't had a conversation prior to this.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
that
sure,
everyone
sure.
listening can benefit from
Well,
knowing.
here's the core device. So basically, what I wanted to do with core was give people a way to track inflammation in the same way that they can now track glucose or track heart rate or steps or heart rate variability and so forth. The idea is that tracking is kind of a different feedback loop from the medical loop. You know, your clinician doesn't really track things. You only see your clinician if you're healthy once a year or something like that for a physical, or if you're even younger, once every 3 years. So there's not a lot of trackable data there, and that's okay. They're looking for acute things and serious emergent sort of problems. But for health tracking, you need to see data with some level of immediacy so that it becomes actionable. So you want to create a feedback loop where you can change something up in your lifestyle and then see a result from it. So it doesn't, in my definition, it doesn't necessarily need to be a within day sort of thing. And inflammation doesn't change intraday. Well, it doesn't change meaningfully within a day. So you don't have to do a finger stick more frequently than, say, once a week. That's the sort of the best use case of the core device. This is it's a finger stick blood test. It's a test called ESR, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, and it was a test that was invented. I think it was the late 1800s or early 1900s. Somebody noticed that when people had more inflammation, their sedimentation rate increased. So that is to say, if I have a tube, you can see a little test tube here inside this cartridge. If I have a column of blood in here, whole blood, the red cells are going to start separating from the plasma just under the force of gravity. And the rate at which they do that is called the sedimentation rate. So my device tracks that rate of falling of the red cells. And so what does that indicate? Well, it's a combination. It's a composite marker. It's basically reflecting a whole series of different inflammatory proteins in the blood. So it's not one protein. CRP is another inflammatory number that your doctor might send you to the lab to test is called CRP, C-reactive protein. And CRP is an inflammatory protein, and it's very spiky.
Do they fall faster?
No, so CRP, the CRP test that the lab does is measuring the concentration of this protein. So it's not it's not a sed rate test at all. You can get a sed rate test at the lab also. CRP is an important inflammatory protein that clinicians look at, but it's very spiky. It's going to tell you sort of acute inflammatory events, like you have an infection or you have a virus, something like that. It's going to spike up quickly and it's going to come down quickly. This marker, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, is reflecting a whole raft of inflammatory proteins. And because of that, it's sort of time averaged. It's sort of a little bit smoother, the curve is. It doesn't go up quite as rapidly as CRP, so it's not really good at picking out these acute events. And it doesn't come down as quickly. So it's more reflective of sort of lingering inflammation that you can, that you really want to get your ESR back down to baseline as quickly as possible, because ESR in, large studies has been shown to be strongly correlated with longevity. So this has been known for years. It's one of the best indicators of longevity that's out there. But why is it, why isn't everybody measuring it today? Well, it has to do with the way the blood test sort of industry changed. So because of healthcare economics, there's now a central lab model. For healthcare economics reasons, blood is now sent to a central facility. And I don't know whether you know what that process looks like, but I'd
love to hear about it. I bet most people don't know.
So if you go and get your blood drawn somewhere, the blood tubes stick around for maybe a half a day, where they're drawn, and maybe they're put into like a metal box outside the clinic's door. And once a day, somebody drives up in a regular automobile from the blood lab, and they pick up all these blood tubes from this hanging bin, and they drive them to the central laboratory, which might be, there's like one central laboratory for Southern California for Quest, and there's one central laboratory in Southern California for LabCorp. So they collect all of these from all the clinics, and they drive them to the central lab, and they get run usually that night. So they get run same day, but they're traveling around in the trunk of a hot car for a half day.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so these are in major metro areas across the country?
Yeah. Everybody that does blood draws has to, send them out somewhere these days, because that's the only way that, our healthcare system will pay for, it's been viewed as the way to reduce healthcare costs is to have centralized testing. But you can't measure ESR that way. Because ESR needs to be measured fresh. You cannot measure ESR if it's beyond 4 hours from the blood draw, and especially not if it's been in the trunk of a hot car. So,
wow, I wonder how many other results are impacted by blood being 4 hours in a hot car.
Well, I can tell you that there are huge error bands on almost every analytical blood test. You can get this data. It's published. It's called proficiency testing data. So every blood laboratory that's reporting blood results they sign up for a service. It's called proficiency testing, and they get sent. The laboratories all get sent some blood samples that are contrived. They're made up blood samples that are mixtures of blood. And the key element is that everybody gets the same blood sample. So there's 1,000 laboratories or 5,000 laboratories, and they all get the same blood sample. And so it's identical. And then everybody runs that blood sample on their own machinery. But so you'd expect the same result, right? Wouldn't you?
You would think.
So And these are all certified laboratories, who are sending out data to patients. But the error bars are like 30%, plus or minus 30%. So this is all what's called, lab error or pre-analytical error. It could be, it's not necessarily error of the machine. It might be an error of the calibration of the machine, but it has a lot more to do with degradation of the sample before it even gets to the machine.
So how many more ways do you think we will be able to test ourselves in the future?
Well, that's what my mission is. My mission is to bring testing to a home setting because I want to eliminate all this pre-analytical error. That's not the primary driver. The primary driver is that I want to give people the information really quickly. And there's another sort of mode of analysis that's popped up where people want more frequent data. You can't go to your doctor and say, okay, I want weekly CRP or ESR measurements. You can't do that because they won't let you, and your insurance won't pay for it. So this has to become a consumer loop, and it's happening more and more. One loop that has become reasonably popular these days are what are called dried blood spot tests. So you've probably done them. You get a little piece of a paper card, and you prick your finger and you do drip, 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 drip onto the card. You sort of let it do the Polaroid picture thing with it, and shake it, and then you put it in the mail and you send it to the laboratory. So the problem is there's all that pre-analytical error is still there, and it's worse because drying the blood actually increases the pre-analytical error. And the laboratories don't get the sample immediately, and they don't run the sample immediately. There's no urgency about it. So you might not get your data for 7 days. And
I've had it be as much as 6 weeks or more.
there you go. Yeah, yeah. I'm an Apple guy. That's not the way you create a feedback loop. The data's stale at that point. So you want to know what to do based on that data result. Your current state, your current physiological state might have changed, right? So you send the data back, and now you're going to take some action based on that stale data. It just doesn't compute to me. And so my mission was to create ways of giving people that data immediately. And so the core device, you do this ESR test, you put it in a reader device, and it reads this sedimentation level in the blood tube. These are single-use disposable, and data goes up for analysis to a highly secure cloud server, and you get a result back to a web app. COR is still the only thing that allows you to track an inflammation number with that kind of immediacy. I was interested in inflammation because it really underpins all chronic disease. It underpins heart disease. It underpins even cancer, even some acute things, cardiovascular disease, metabolic diseases. They're all correlated with and underpinned by inflammation. I had all this sort of knowledge now about inflammation, and I found this ESR marker, which was largely forgotten because healthcare economics had caused clinicians to move away from it. But it's really a better marker. It's because it reflects so many inflammatory pathways in your body. This all-cause inflammation is really what's impacting longevity, and the interventions are lifestyle related. They're foods and supplements and stress reduction and sleep improvement and things like that are going to. And we have lots of data now. We have over 10,000 of these tests from users, and they've tagged their data with what things that they did, and we have a sub-cohort of our users who've lowered their inflammation over the time that they've been using COR, and so we know what's working for them. We know what we want to recommend people try. It's very personalized. But we can show you the universe of things that have worked and let you find out what works for you.
Well, you've explained a lot of things that allow me to go back at points in time when I've had conversations about inflammation with different doctors and understand those conversations better. So, for example, in 2018 or 2019, it was the last time I saw a primary care physician. And I asked him to test C-reactive protein, and he said no. He said, there's nothing we can do about it if we find it, so I don't test for it. And I took that to mean there's nothing we can do about inflammation. I thought he was nuts. But what you're telling me is that it's not a great measure of a general inflammatory state, and it wouldn't necessarily be reflective of a change in lifestyle, and it might be influenced by lab situations or blood. And so now I'm less upset with him. So I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, it's not him. It's the whole loop, right? The whole loop. Right. It's looking for a diagnosis so that there can be a therapeutic.
And then I had chronic inflammatory response syndrome as caused by mold.
Oh, wow.
And so I had to get really invested in understanding what inflammation is and how to get rid of it. And I did this without any sort of measurement. I could only read my own body signals. I didn't have a tool that would allow me to know. So my functional medicine doctor sent me for several inflammatory tests that aren't covered by insurance and aren't standard. What is it, like TNA alpha and VGF and some of these things that are tied to inflammation. And they were all off the charts, and he diagnosed me, blah, blah, blah. I did finally, years later, take a test that tested for interleukin 6 and 8 and 11, I think. Mm-hmm. And they were all well within normal ranges. And I was like,
Great.
oh, good. But that was like 4 years later. I
Yeah.
had no ability in the interim to know if my lifestyle changes were working.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
before I knew about COR Health. I was just doing it on my own. And so I know that there's a whole segment of the population who are struggling with histones and SIRS and even Lyme would cause a chronic inflammatory situation. And then I think even just women of around my age, women 45 to 55 are experiencing inflammatory states because of the fluctuations in hormones and looking for answers. And so what do you hear people are generally struggling with, be it with the system or in their own bodies, before they find COR?
Yeah, they know they're not feeling well, and they're looking for answers to why. They often do go to get blood work done with their doctor, and often their inflammation markers are normal within the normal range. But one thing that I find is interesting is normal is really not good enough. So you can so I'll talk about ESR because I love talking about ESR. But if you're female above the age of 50, your ESR level is within the clinical normal range if it's under 30. So 30 is a number that means millimeters per hour. So that's the sedimentation rate. In a population that has very low inflammation, so let's say Norway, Norwegian people have very low inflammation, and it has to do with lifestyle, and it has to do with things like salmon. It's not a genetic thing, because genetically they're very similar to Americans. There are lots of Norwegians in America, my wife being one of them. So in Norway, a 50-year-old female across the population has an average ESR of 8.
Wow.
So the number 30 comes from looking at the entire population across the world. And there are a lot of inflammatory processes going on. And I don't know whether you know how standard normal ranges work in blood data, but it has nothing to do with what is healthy. It has to do with a statistical calculation of 95% of the population. So it's a definition that you take all your data and all your measurements, and you just put a line and say the top 5% of them are abnormal, are out of normal range. 95% of people are within normal range.
That sounds. Given the 60% of people in America have a chronic health condition,
right?
I feel like anything outside of 40% of a band, is problematic.
So there's a mismatch, right? And people don't understand this, that your doctor will tell you that you don't have inflammation, right? If you have a number of 30, they'll tell you don't have inflammation, but you do. They can't do anything about it anyway, because there's no drug therapy that, you don't really want that anyway. But fortunately, there are a lot of lifestyle things that work really well for lowering inflammation. So we consider a normal range in our data it's a little lower for men. Actually, women have slightly higher inflammation in our data, but actually in anybody's data, and it does increase with age too. So we do see that trend in our data. But if you say that the Norwegians have it going on, right, and they're kind of more what you should be aiming for, only something like 20% of our data of our tests that we have run, 20 to 25% of the data tests that we've run, are people really in an optimal range. So chances are high that if people use the COR device, they're going to find some inflammation, and they're going to be able to work on that to lower it. And it's one of the most, in terms of longevity, and that is correlated also with quality of life, it's one of the most important things you can do is lower your inflammation.
I'd love to know what, and you may not know specifically, but if you have a sense of whether or not people are coming to you because they are biohackers and they're interested in optimizing their health and they're obsessed with data, or if you think people are finding this solution because of a personal challenge that they need significant help with, because that would drive some of the results too, right? Like if it's mostly biohackers,
Yeah.
maybe they've been working on inflammation a long time, but if it's someone who's in pain, that's a whole different story.
It does. It's sort of trifurcated. There are three different groups of people that have come to us. The earliest adopters, as you might imagine, were the biohackers, and sort of ultra fit people also. So people who are all in optimizers, not necessarily biohackers, but they're just looking to be the fittest version of themselves that they can be. So they were the earliest adopters, and then there also is a significant cohort of people who have been diagnosed with a chronic inflammatory condition such as rheumatoid arthritis, and they're looking for or things like eczema. Eczema is a very skin autoimmune things, gut autoimmune things like celiac or gluten sensitivity is another area that causes a lot of inflammation and will cause your ESR to be higher than you want it to be, or a chronic diagnosed autoimmune thing like rheumatoid arthritis. So we have that group of people also, but we're starting to get people who we're fortunate. I think our timing is good because inflammation is in the zeitgeist right now. People are aware of inflammation, and it makes sense to people that this is kind of an underlying thing that they could work on, and everything that they're doing that we call health, healthy practices, every single one of them is correlated with a reduction in inflammation. So, in
that regard, you might even translate the ESR score to biological age.
We actually do in the app. So in the COR app, we do produce a COR age, a COR ESR age, and it's it's not just it's not a woo-woo sort of number. We have built models of our user population, and we say, okay, so if you're a 50-year-old female, not to pick on 50-year-old females again, but what is the average in our population? And then if your ESR is above that, then your biological age is higher than your chronological age, and vice versa. The most important point I would make on age clocks is we could probably debate the accuracy question quite a bit, and they do have a lot of data supporting their positions on that. But what's lacking is the feedback loop, right? Because you can't be doing a real age test every week.
No, not unless you're Brian Johnson.
Not unless you're right, exactly. Not unless you've sold. Anyway, so you don't have a feedback loop. So I think a simple biological clock like ESR, and it's well documented that ESR increases with age, so you can look at a population cohort and build a clock from that. So that's what we've done, and it's fungible, so you can improve it, and it's immediate. Those if you don't have those two things, then why what's the point really?
Yeah. And so, have you seen people get more motivated through the app to take action based on some of the feedback from other users? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I guess the most recent example, I have a colleague friend, and his wife is a nurse practitioner, and she was interested in looking at her inflammation, and I said, gave her core device, and her first reading was not super high. It was like 12, so it was within normal limits. But I wanted her to be able to lower that. So I told her my strategies involved. Tart cherry juice is something that works really well for me. It has anti-inflammatory compounds in it. It's a well-known anti-inflammatory. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but every major college or professional sports team is now using tart cherry juice with all of its players to drink tart cherry juice after workouts to control inflammation.
There's some debate around that with respect to cold plunges.
Oh, interesting.
Because cold plunging reduces inflammation, and they're recommending that you do it before a workout rather than after.
Oh, wow.
Because that inflammation after a workout is what grows muscle mass.
Yeah.
And that it's useful, and that you want to wait some period of time. Now, in a case where someone needs to get out and play, and there's a sporting objective, there's a mission to win.
Yeah, right.
Lowering the inflammation would certainly keep them in the game longer. So I can see why that matters more in sports than in biohacking. In biohacking, people are allowing themselves to experience that post-workout inflammation,
right? And
then resetting the body in the morning with a cold plunge or something else.
That's really fascinating. So the sports teams have found that it's beneficial for sports. And I think it has to do with recovery, right? So you want to be ready. It's a periodic thing, right? You want to be ready for the next match. So it is important to get to go through the recovery process.
And they're probably doing the cold plunging after workouts.
Probably
too.
So, and I've done cold.
Same reason.
Tart cherry juice has a double action. One is it has anthocyanins and other sort of compounds in it that are directly anti-inflammatory. But it also contains melatonin and some other sort of things that stimulate a tryptophan pathway in your body. So they're both sleep-inducing compounds. So tart cherry juice before bedtime.
Okay.
And it reduces inflammation. There's data that quantitates how much extra sleep people got in a large population by consuming tart cherry juice before bedtime. And it's like 40 minutes of extra sleep.
Wow.
Yeah.
I could use that.
Unheard of, right? And so why isn't everybody doing this? And so that and sleep is itself, a good sleep is anti-inflammatory. So it's a double whammy.
That's such great advice. I think we should close on that.
Perfect. Yeah. If everybody were to do that, they would see a benefit. But I should say we have a database with hundreds of actually thousands of other compounds and practices and supplements and so forth that are known to be anti-inflammatory. So,
well, let's tell everyone how to find COR Health and how to access this database. Yeah.
So our website is corhealth.com, and there's no E in the core, so it's corhealth.com. All written out as one word. We don't sell the supplements or the food items, but they're readily available. And you can set up an experiment for 2 weeks and test a second time. The core device is very inexpensive. You sign up for a membership where you get 5 of these tests auto shipped to you every month for $49. And this is free. We let you have this to use during the time of your membership. So for $49 a month recurring, you get 5 tests monthly. You can use those all yourself and test weekly, or you can share them with your family. You can have 2 or more members of your family testing inflammation with the same device and the same subscription.
That's extremely well priced. Is there a minimum time period for the subscription?
No, you could cancel in a month if you want to, or you can keep it going.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it, Bob.
Thank you very much, Sandy. It was a pleasure.